And there we finally have it. The Overdrive for Jin. And surprisingly, Sylph as well. I know Queen was, already pretty strong with her Overdrive, but I'll talk about it in a little bit. But I will say, I still don't think that any of the characters' overdrives are in their complete form. Like, whatever the highest end state of their overdrive is going to look like. And the reason I think that is the case is just still looking at Draken Joe's. His was somebody who had, like, fully mastered his ether gear. We know that he was super high level, and his overdrive covered his whole body, where still the most part, like, the Eden Zero crew, their overdrives, it alters their whole set. Like, they have different outfits, and they're pretty much just form switches as well at the same time, but their overdrive, like that kind of like black coated area, is mostly on their forearms, whereas again it's not covering the entirety of their body like Draken Joe's was. So I still think these aren't in their fullest state. It would just be a little odd if all the characters were reaching like their end form already. I think this is just like the first stage of it, and they'll just kind of evolve and then eventually cover their whole body, and they'll have like their most high-end form. Doesn't name it like Super Saiyan 1 kind of thing, and then there's still going to be levels above it, but it's still the same power. But it was a really good chapter. We had just some insight into their backstory. Well, pretty much just Jin. Like, we know that it still relates to Sylph, but Jin was the one to take up the majority of the chapter, and his whole flashback with Callum was really cool, and it had more of Ace that would like, okay, yeah, this is just somebody that he wants to eventually defeat. He still is, like I said, is going to be a memorable character just from tying into this scene of Jin, like, achieving Overdrive, but also being somebody directly in his backstory that is clearly important, because it was like a guy that he was striding to end up defeating one day, and he's like, even said like, hey, the next time I meet you, then I'm gonna defeat you. Like, right when Callum was like, all right, I'm gonna leave the dojo and go out and go do stuff. It did make a lot of sense when they were explaining like pretty much how Ether Empire works, because you have you got Laguna on the ship. Like, Laguna's aware he's from here, so he's pretty much explaining in like the quickest fashion is generally ether gear ends up boosting your own capabilities and making you stronger. But a lot of the Aoi Cosmos ether gear is about like messing with their opponent's ether and making them weaker. And he even explains like that's reason why his overdrive, or not his overdrive, his ether gear, what's he call it, Lover's Tears, why the effect of like if he can catch you crying while it's active, he can turn you into water. It's just got a condition to be met. We also got a little bit more on Lyra. She's pretty much saying like, oh yeah, that my value in my cards isn't just like their ability to control the numbers and like mess them, it's to change the attributes. But she doesn't know what she's going to use until like what power she's going to have until she actually goes and ends up using it. Still pretty good. It's kind of like witches. I'm wondering if there's any other variable effect of it that is besides just kind of like having the various elements. And like regardless, that's still a really good power. It's a solid move, even if it's similar to what Witch has. I don't think anybody's gonna be like, oh man, I don't want that part. It's like, okay, you get multiple attributes and you can just like throw elements at people. But with Jin, he pretty much just has to kind of normalize his ether, regain control, and he will undo the effects and abilities of this guy's power. You pretty much just have to kind of like stabilize your own ether and prevent that takeover from happening. It doesn't seem like it's that crazy of a thing, especially if you have something like Overdrive. I'm pretty sure that if it was just like the ether lines like extending off the body, that's pseudo Overdrive, that you would probably still be able to cancel it out, and it would just come down to like a level of control between you and your opponent. Obviously he has Overdrive. We haven't seen any of the Oceans having Overdrive. I still am wondering if we're going to end up seeing the older members of the Oceans, like the previous generation, who still have Fabiano, and I'm guessing he would have the full capability of contacting all the other previous Oceans and being like, hey, we kind of need you. Like, these newer guys, they're not, like, they just weren't ready for all this kind of stuff. Because they're definitely strong. They all have really good powers and good abilities that, would show a high level of potential, but it just seems that they were not at level with the Eden Zero crew and where they're at with their abilities. And there was this really good line from Jin when he's talking about like his past and like all the stuff that he's done, kind of just recounting different events that's like transpired, obviously like how his family used to be, and then like what happened with Mueller, where he was on Gills, going to the dojo, eventually meeting Draken Joe, doing stuff for Sister, and now he has made it to the Eden Zero, and because of them, they're like him and Sylph are both able to get past this horrible part in their lives and move forward. And now this is what they call home, which was really nice. It was a really good feeling kind of moment for him, for somebody who was just like this kind of like cold-hearted mercenary you thought he only had one person in the entire universe really that he could rely on, that he could like actually call his family and like enjoy, that being his sister. But now he's got like the whole Eden Zero crew, and I think they're better off for it. And I think he knows that as well. That's when he ends up just kind of like charging up his ether and then retaking control and going into attack Callum. Callum's just like, oh shit, he normalizes his ether. But I'm guessing that even if like that move doesn't work, he still can fight. It's not like he has to rely on this level hack. So he's a martial artist with a pretty strong power by itself. But unfortunately for him, it's just Jin was just stronger. Jin's training with Xenolith, everybody's training with Xenolith just seems to overtake where the Oceans are at. And again, I think if the Oceans also had Overdrive, like if we end up getting to Fabiano and he has Overdrive, I'm guessing he's going to be a way harder opponent if so. If he doesn't have Overdrive, I'll actually kind of be disappointed. Because like with the younger people, it's just like, okay, well, we know that Overdrive is like a high-end technique that it's hard to obtain. Most of the Eden Zero people have had their ether gears for a while, and I can see the same thing with like the Oceans, but we don't know if they were training with somebody that could give them Overdrive. So maybe it's gonna be like Shura. There's no way Shura doesn't have Overdrive, because if Shura doesn't have Overdrive, Shiki should just completely body him the second he goes into it. Fabiano, I feel like, should have it. Like it'll be really weird if if the most senior member of the Oceans does not have Overdrive, given his age and probably how long he's had his ether gear. And then what's her name, Izuna, because like she looks like at the end of the chapter she might be stronger than the Oceans. I would hope, besides Fabiano, because she's like saying how like the Oceans are kind of like weak and useless. So I'm willing to bet she's actually pretty powerful. But that also makes you wonder who she's gonna fight, because a lot of people are saying like, well, maybe that's gonna be Rebecca's 1v1 fight. But it's like if Izuna is strong, like stronger than the Oceans, I don't really know how she's going to end up defeating Izuna. Maybe she could have a team fight or something. Maybe her and Homura could like team up to go against her. I don't really know right now. We've got to like see whether or not she's just kind of capping, or if she's actually like able to back up that level of potential hype behind her. And once they go into Overdrive, it's just light work at that point for these guys. It's similar to when Shiki went up against Orc. Like he was able to contend with him, but once he went Overdrive, he just overpowered these guys and was able just to pretty much maul them. Okay, the thing though that I do want to talk about, one, I do think the forms, Jin's is really cool. He's got like this badass space Tengu looking thing with that cape, whereas Sylph's is cool. I like the wings, and I like her general outfit. Her hair is a little bit odd, because I think it's just because like the long stream of hair going behind her, it just doesn't meld with the hairstyle that she has normally, so it just looks a little strange. Like she has like a hair clip on with just like a long weave that she's got tied in there. I still don't really think that she should have this already, because like it's very clear it's some form of it's got to be some form of Overdrive. It's not as like black coated as like the other ones, but neither is Jin's. Like Jin doesn't have the same kind of heavily. I wish we knew what that like stuff was called. Like when she goes Overdrive, and then it's like the parts on his body that turn black, and he's got like the ether lines in between them. I wish there was a term for whatever that is called, so I could just say that instead of just saying like this black coating. Either way, I like her design. I think it's not bad. It's definitely my least favorite out of the Overdrive so far. Jin's is definitely up there. Jin's is really cool. I think his is badass. I really want to see what else he can do in that form, because he just uses a sick Wind God Ripper and just tears right through Callum. But the thing I wanted to mention is, like, I am not really like Jin. I knew Jin was gonna have Overdrive because with Homura, there was no way that Homura would have it and Jin wouldn't. And then with Wise, there was absolutely zero chance that Jin was not gonna have Overdrive if Wise had Overdrive, because besides Shiki, Jin was the closest to achieving Overdrive. Shiki only obtained it in the same arc that we saw Jin get that whole, ether lines off the body thing, and that meant that from what we've seen, that's like the step right before you eventually achieve Overdrive. So it didn't make any sense. Like, I knew that if Homura and Wise had it, then Jin has to have it. I'm not gonna get mad that Sylph has it. I would have preferred her not to have it. It's the same way, though, that I would have preferred Wise not to have Overdrive yet. I was hoping both of them would be at that ether lines off the body, because now Rebecca's, like, the only one who doesn't have Overdrive. And, like, if Sylph and Wise were in that same kind of category, or at least, like, they were at that pseudo-Overdrive, you would have, like, Rebecca right there, one tier above them, you have the ether lines off the body, which could be Wise and Sylph, and then you'd have the Overdrive people right above them. Because Shiki and Jin, like I said, like, they were already really close. Morris had it for years. She's been training a lot. She constantly has been using her ether gear and just kind of pushing herself, like, in every single scenario that she's been in. So I don't know. It's a little weird that now only Rebecca doesn't have it, because that's why I would have really preferred if you had the two other people, because it just feels like now she's way far behind. And I get that she's not an experienced fighter. She's, like, the newest with her ether gear. She's only had it for a little bit of time. But I don't know. I just don't really like the idea of her being the only one right now without it. But I also don't want her to get rushed to have it. I don't want them to just kind of, like, just give her ether gear, or Overdrive on her ether gear just to have Overdrive. And I know Sylph was already strong. Like, she was one of the Element 4 for Drac and Joe. But we never saw that ether lines off the body thing with her. I would have preferred her and Wise to both be at that stage right now, because, like, the same thing with Wise, I definitely wanted his fight to be, like, way more heavily focused on his Arsenal suit. Like, if his Arsenal suit was, like, way more of an upgrade. Like, instead of his suit and his Overdrive just went one more step up, if he had the ether lines and then the Mark II for his Arsenal suit, I think that would have been better for me, at least from my perspective. Obviously, like, what goes in the story is different from, like, me as a reader and my take. So, like, again, I'm not gonna be upset about this. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. Now Rebecca's just kind of like the only one who hasn't achieved this state, and it feels like it's gonna be far away before she ends up doing it. I know there's other people on the Eden Zero ship. Like, you have Couchpo, but, like, Couchpo doesn't have ether gear as far as we know. But it was a solid chapter. I like the part when they're saying how, like, now they're wind, after it's been, like, kind of, like, cut away from that, like, darker life. They're like, okay, they're the wind of the Eden Zero, and they're going to use their wind to move the ship, the crew, and Shiki all forward. So that was a really solid chapter. I really liked just the stuff with Jin. I liked his backstory, like, extra bit. The Overdrive form looks really cool. I want to see more just techniques that he can do in this. I think he looks really badass when he's moving. He's got, like, the cape all behind him, like these black wings. He looks like he just looks like a badass. But anyway, other than that, though, comment below. Thumbs up the video, a friend, like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But than that, I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.